welcome back. For today's video, I decided that I would read and review a book recommended by the BookTok community, and today's book is entitled The Turn of the Key by author Ruth Ware. And as you can see, I have flagged a few pages, something that is unusual for me. This is my first time looking through a book and reading it and making notations of parts that kind of stood out to me. And the thing is, I really had high hopes for this book. Just 30 pages in, I was excited for this story, and I even went to my boyfriend. And you know how sometimes when you talk to some men, they kind of only listen to part of what you're saying. And I was telling him about the book, and I'm telling him about this girl who gets this job nannying at this house that's considered, that there's talk that the house may be haunted. And I'm telling him how the people who are looking for the nanny created this ad, and they're willing to pay her this excessive amount of money to come and look after the kids. And at the beginning, the main character, Rowan, she's kind of like, she's not superstitious. So the thought that people think that the house may be haunted doesn't really bother her. But as she's on her ride to the house, she thinks about how it is a lot of money, that they've offered her a lot of money, and they've had a lot of cooks and a lot of other nannies that have quit recently. And she thinks that maybe I should take this into consideration as to why these people are leaving. So I'm telling my boyfriend about this book, and later on that evening, I selected a movie, and we're lying in bed, and about 5 minutes into the movie, he's like, "What is this we're watching?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "This is not the movie that you told me about earlier." And I'm like, "It wasn't a movie, but if you think about it, it sounds like a great setup for a movie." But the thing is, it's like within so many pages, the story kind of changes. The tone of the story changes. In the beginning, Rowan is writing these letters to this lawyer that she wants to represent her. She's pleading to Mr. Rexler to consider her case, and she's giving him a lot of background information. However, when she gets to the home, when she actually gets to the house for her interview, the story kind of changes as it's being told from her point of view. So it kind of takes a shift, whereas the story is not as interesting as it began. And one of my biggest issues with the story is the description. In my opinion, the description in the story was overdone. I mean, there's this excessive amount of description, and when she's describing the house, when Rowan first gets to the house, she describes the house in like every detail from each room as she moves throughout the house, to the point where I'm thinking, this must have something to do with the story. This must have something to do with how the story moves about, that this is going to come up later in the story, this deep detailed description. However, it does not. And there's a point in the story that she says the word Victorian so many times that I wanted to scream and claw my eyes out. And I'm like, if she says Victorian one more time. But I mean, there's even a part in the story that I flagged. This part had me laughing. The part of the story reads, "The utility room turned out to be in the older part of the house, probably the original scullery, judging by the Victorian sink and stone flag floor. But I wasn't in the mood to appreciate architectural details. However, when the kid's mother, Sandra, takes her on a tour the next morning of the house, she again goes into very, very, very vivid detail, describing down to the most minute thing in the house, and I just wanted to scream. I mean, even when she first sees her room for the first time, she describes where the bed is situated in the house in contrast to the dressers and the curtains in the house. And I'm like, do we really need to know all this? I mean, I tried to read this book from a reader's perspective. Unfortunately, I had to take out my editor's hat several times throughout the story. There were many places where it was either too much description or not enough detail. Like there's a point in the story when Rowan is leaving and the second oldest daughter, she runs up to Rowan and she's wrapping her arms around Rowan and she's telling her, not to come back. She's whispering something to her and Rowan can't really hear it. And even the family thinks it's odd because Maddie is not the type of child to show affection. And Rowan's trying to pry the little girl away but not be excessive because this is her interview process. And I'm thinking, okay, the mother's standing outside and Jack, the caretaker of the home and the person that tends the ground, is standing there and he's waiting for Rowan to take her back to the train station and is kind of pushing it because Rowan needs to get back to catch this train. And I'm thinking, why aren't we seeing the story through these people's eyes? What is Sandra thinking while her daughter is latched on to this stranger? And what is Jack doing while he's impatiently waiting for Rowan for this scene to pass so he can get this woman in the car and take her home? And there's also another part of the story where the baby, Ellie, spills oatmeal on Rowan's shirt and Rowan goes off into the utility room to clean the shirt and she takes her shirt off and Jack comes in. He comes in and he sees her with her shirt off and it's an uncomfortable moment for both of them and he just kind of walks away. But the next morning he's taking her to the train station and I'm thinking, what was that ride like? That had to be an awkward ride, and I think that was a chance for the author to delve into other parts of the story where we could see the characters in these situations. And eventually Rowan does move into the house and the house is called Heather Bray. And as we know, unless it's a soap opera, if you got a house that's named, it never fares well for the characters. So Rowan moves into the house and of course things start happening and it gets a little crazy and she's not getting any sleep, and a lot of times she's blaming what's happening on her. She's blaming her perception on what's happening on her lack of sleep. And there's even a point where I feel like the description gets in the way of the story. It gets in the way of the thrilling, the suspense of the story, where the author could have helped me more, could have kept me in the seat of my chair, wanting to know what's going to happen. And she interrupts what's happening a lot of times with unnecessary description. There's a part in the story where Rowan finds out that there's this secret attic in the back of her room. And while she's there, she sees this stack of porcelain dolls. And when she leaves, the dolls fall onto the floor and one of the dolls' head rolls out towards her and his eyes are facing her. So later that night, Rowan doesn't want to sleep in her room. I don't think any of us would want to. And she sleeps on the couch that night. Well, when she wakes up, Ellie, the second youngest daughter, is lying on her sleep. And when Rowan wakes up and she realizes where she's at, she fluffs the covers and she hears something fall onto the floor. Well, in my opinion, if I'm having this crazy time in this house and things are happening that are unexplained and I hear something fall onto the floor, my first instinct is to go find out what it is. However, Rowan gets up, folds up her covers, and then goes and tries to find out what this thing is. And I'm thinking, this added detail of explaining what the character is doing was unnecessary and it hurt the story. In my opinion, it should have been that the doll's head rolled onto the floor and she gets up to inspect it and her heart freezes in terror from seeing this doll's head that she's thinking, how did this get down here? And also there's another part of the story where she's in the kitchen and it's late at night and she sees a dark shadow figure pass by the window. And in getting up to find out what it is, the author has her walk around the counter, go to the right and head towards the door. And I'm like, why was it necessary to describe her path to go to the door? You're breaking up the story and taking away from the suspense of it all. But in all of this and all the craziness that happened, the story leads us to this big reveal. And I just have a question for some of you who maybe have read this book. Did that big reveal to you seem like such a big reveal? Was it really a major part of the story? Something that's like, oh, got me. Oh, I didn't see that coming. Or was it just kind of like, I didn't really care? I don't really know how it really tied in the story. It was like there was 3 different stories being told in this one book, from the main character being sort of secretive to whatever was going on at the house, and then we have this big reveal at the end that I'm just kind of like, and I just felt like, I don't know, it's just too many elements going on in this story. And there was chances to make this a more suspenseful story, a more of a thriller, even if, as I found out at the end, it wasn't really supposed to be a thriller. It was just supposed to be, I'm not even really sure. But because this story didn't turn out to be the story I thought it was going to be, and because it could have been so much more, I ended up giving The Turn of the Key 3 stars. I really had high hopes for this book, and I even read some of the reviews on Amazon where some people said that this was nothing compared to some of the other books that she's written. And I don't know, in my opinion, I think maybe as an author grows, that sometimes the editors that they work with, that maybe because if people have been buying the books, that maybe they back off when it comes to editing and not making suggestions that should have been made. Like, maybe you should cut this portion. Maybe this part's a little redundant in the story. Maybe if you did this, it could make the story flow better. And so, like I said, and being that I only gave the book 3 stars, I was very disappointed with the ending. There's also a part in the back of the book that the author has questions, like if you have a book club, if you want to ask each other. And I just found that the questions to be like, who cares? Like I said, who cares? I didn't really care. I mean, I don't know, I didn't care. So if any of you have read this book and have any opinions, let me know what you think. Let me know if you thought the story was all that, if you were one of the people that gave it 5 stars on Amazon, if you were one of the people who saw the suggestion on booktok and thought, I gotta get that book, and read it and said, yeah, I agree with everybody, this was a great book. And that concludes today's video. Thank you again for taking the time to watch. Let me give you my opinions on some of my books. And until next time, I want you guys to stay safe, take care, and try and do something nice for a stranger so we can all do our part to try and make this world a better place.